The following tutorial is brought to you by WholeLoops.com.
It's production time. I'm Reid Stefan, realist puppet in the game. Today, I'm going to be giving you guys a little tour of my home studio. We're just going to be going from left to right. So I'm sure a lot of you guys are thinking right now, show me that vocal chain. So we're just going to start with the golden starter piece right here, the Sony C800G. This is probably my favorite microphone under the sun because of how detailed and transparent the recordings are. It's an extremely clean sounding microphone, and it cranks out a lot of heat, which is why it has this exhaust system attached to the back. But if you have this mic, you're probably going to need to run it through something that is going to give it a little bit more color, like this Vintech X73 Preamp. Now this is kind of a clone, I guess, more modern remake of the classic Neve 1073 Preamp. Way more affordable, rack mountable, much easier to use. I got the EQ on right now, low cut in my voice at around 50, because I don't really like to low cut with plugins. I don't think it sounds very good. And controlling the dynamics on the way into my Apollo is this TubeTech CL1B compressor. I think this has got to be one of the most transparent compressors you could ever track with, and that's exactly what I use it for. This is my tracking compressor. I don't send signal out of Ableton into this. I record signal into Ableton through this. So my mic always gets compressed on the way in when I'm recording my tutorials or recording a singer. This thing is just going to take all the peaks off of it in a very transparent fashion. And then down here is the centerpiece to really the whole studio, the Apollo Duo. It's got 8 ins, 8 outs, 2 headphone outs. I'm actually using all the inputs on this. I got my mic going into input 1. And I'm using a couple of the outputs too to run off to what I have over here. And that would be my guitar pedals. And I use these guitar pedals for pretty much everything but guitar. I actually suck pretty bad at guitar. I don't run guitars through these. I'm actually usually running vocals or software synths through these just to give them that analog flavor, to give them that analog girth. And these do exactly that. So this first one is called Polymoon by Meris. It is a stereo delay pedal, which means you could do ping pong delays with this. The rest of these pedals are all mono, except for this blue one here too. But this is a really cool retro synthetic sounding delay. Definitely a flavor of delay that I've never heard of from a plugin, and I love to just track vocals through this and then record the output of this 100% wet back into Ableton. So I kind of have like an aux send channel that I can then mix back in with my dry. So I always run the wet dry knob at 100% on these pedals when I record them. Next one over is the Mercury 7 by Meris, and this is a reverb that if you've ever heard the soundtrack from the movie Blade Runner, you would recognize. This is basically that whole movie soundtrack in a reverb pedal. Really cool sci-fi sounding reverbs, and I just run all sorts of stuff through this. Again, you can track stereo through this. All these other ones, like this next reverb pedal over, the Afterneath by Earthquaker, is a mono pedal. So if I want to make a stereo reverb stem, I just track it in twice and put one in the left ear, one in the right ear. But this is like Valhalla Shimmer meets heavy metal. It's such a grimy tone, but control-wise, it gives you a lot of the controls that you would get in Valhalla Shimmer. The next one over, OCD, very simple overdrive pedal with a high-pass and low-pass filter on it if you want to do some filtering and distorting, tone knob, volume knob, and a drive knob are all you get on there. But that's really all you need. I use this to just distort anything that I would ever put a distortion plugin on. If I'm looking for a flavor of distortion that really can't be attained through plugins, that's why I'm really sending stuff out to these guitar pedals. The next one over, MXR Sub Machine. Now this thing is filthy. It's a fuzz pedal in conjunction with a sub octave pedal. So there is a knob called sub, and that controls how much you hear of a octave down signal. And that sounds so much better than doing a little altar boy or the Ableton pitch it down an octave. This just sounds absolutely filthy. Again, all these things are about tone, and a different tone than you could get out of a plugin, because these aren't really any technique or type of effect that you couldn't do with a guitar pedal. These guitar pedals are not an effect that you couldn't do without a plugin. Obviously, you could distort, reverb, delay. You have it with plugins, but these just don't sound like plugins. And as soon as you hear these, and if you're interested in a tutorial about mixing with outboard gear, leave it in a comment below. I've kind of been holding off on doing that because I wasn't sure how many of y'all would actually find that information useful or applicable. But if you guys are curious to hear what these things sound like, I'll be putting together a tutorial. And last but not least, we got the vintage Ibanez Tube Screamer. This is one of the OG ones from 1980. They don't make them like they used to, but they actually did come out with a reissue of the Tube Screamer that sounds pretty similar. I have been going to Guitar Center like every day for the last couple months, just buying and returning stuff, just so I could understand the difference in how all these pedals sound. And I ended up just keeping the ones that were my favorites and returning all the ones that I didn't really find that useful for sending Ableton stems through. And when I first got these guitar pedals, I thought they sounded absolutely horrendous, and then I very quickly realized that you need to convert the signal to a high impedance instead of line level signal. And to do that, I'm using this orange box down here. If you can see it, that's a Radial Reamping Box. All that's doing is basically converting the output of the Apollo over here, which sends out line level, low impedance, into a high impedance. I guess you could call it mic level. It's not technically mic level, but that's the format of signal that these pedals use. So if you're not sending the correct format of signal into these, they're going to sound like absolute trash. So to use guitar pedals, you're going to need a reamping box to convert it. You can get a smaller one of these for like $100. Really, really convenient. Actually, these two, you can send line level right into them. But these are really expensive pedals. They do a whole lot. These cost like twice as much as the rest of these pedals.
Do your reggaeton rhythms sound like they could use a little tan? Are your Latin beats lacking culture and organic flavor? Here at Whole Loops, we've got the product for you. Introducing Hot Tropics 2, the sample pack sequel jam-packed with all the seasonings and tropical heat needed for your next Spotify smash. Hot Tropics 2 is available now only at wholeloops.com.
Anyways, moving over. We have got a LG monitor going down into my MacBook Pro. I have the MacBook Pro with all the USB-C ports. To tell you the truth, I don't know why everyone complains about the USB-C ports. For the first time in my life, I have two things plugged into my laptop. Only two out of all this whole desk of shit consolidated into two cables. So everyone is claiming how inconvenient it is for everything to be USB-C, but I must say this has to be the most convenient setup I have ever had in my life. So don't be put off by all the people who have probably never even tried USB-C, who just complain that it is made all their gear useless. None of this gear became useless when I got the new MacBook Pro. So that was kind of a little side rant. Moving on. We got the Moogs. We got a Slim Phatty on the bottom, and we have the Moog Voyager on the top. The Slim Phatty definitely has much more modern sounding presets, but this is just so meaty, just meaty subs, pads that will shake your freaking chest. I absolutely love these and use them all the time. I usually start out with a Serum sound that's kind of similar, and then at the very end, I'll just track this in, because if you're tracking in a hardware synth, you're doing it as audio. And if you have to change the tempo or change the key, you're going to really ruin your audio quality. So I tend to leave everything software up until the very, very end, and then I'll go and replace it with a better sound from here. So moving over to the rest of these synths, we got the Roland Fantom G6. Now this thing is like having contact in a box. As you can see, it's not a touchscreen. This thing came out in like 2004, shortly before touchscreens hit the market. So you just scroll through the categories, and then in each category is a massive, massive bank of whatever it is that you select as the category. Like, for example, just a load of strings. There's some really, really awesome sounding ones in here. I'm just gonna pick a random one and play it. Really, really meaty, really nice. You could go up to, let's play some piano real quick. I find these to sound way more musical, way more realistic than anything that I could have gotten out of Omnisphere. And honestly, these don't cost too much different from what Omnisphere costs. The difference is Omnisphere is going to be worthless in the future, and this is going to be worth even more in the future. So I chose to invest my money in this direction. I still have some plugins that I use synths for, mostly Serum and Contact. But next up, we got the Juno 106, another absolute classic. This is another OG one from the 80s and super retro sounding. I absolutely love playing this thing. The sounds are really, really inspiring, although all you really get to make sounds from is a sawtooth, a square tooth, and this sub and a white noise oscillator. So every single preset, and you have 8 banks with 8 patches in them, every single preset here is just made out of a sine wave, saw wave, or square wave, because that was all this thing could do. And to help this talk to Ableton, because this doesn't even have USB in it, it's MIDI into a MIDI converter down here, that red cable, which then goes into the computer. And speaking of cables, if anybody knows any good tutorials on cable management, as you could see, my cable management situation here is definitely in need of a tutorial. So if anyone knows any good videos about how to manage your cables better, leave it in a link below, because I clearly need to watch one of those. But there you have it. That is my entire home studio. This is a pop music factory, a hip hop music factory, a tutorial factory, just a general hub for people to come and write songs. On the days of the week where I'm not uploading on YouTube, I have people here, usually a musician sitting here playing the keys while I produce in Ableton, and then a singer over here on the mic, and we're writing a song. So that's what's going on in here when I'm not making tutorials. Everything in here gets used. It's all very, very conveniently placed because of this Argosy Halo desk is the model name. Argosy Halo is what the name of the desk is. And I gotta say, if you guys remember my earlier YouTube uploads from about a year ago, I was on an IKEA table with a couple of pieces of warm audio recording gear, and I used that to make money to upgrade to this. And almost everything on this table was purchased used. You can get amazing, amazing value for your gear if you purchase used. And once you've made enough money to upgrade to the next level, just sell off that piece of used gear and upgrade it. Like that's what I did for my preamps and my compressor. I started out with one that cost a couple $100, made a couple $1,000 using it, and then sold it and spent a couple $1,000 on this. And now I make even more money producing music with this. So you really got to be smart and climb the ladder and just chase amazing values. You do not need any of this gear to make music. Honestly, when I got all this gear, the first thing that happened was I got hella depressed because I realized I still sucked. You can't just throw a bunch of money at Guitar Center and expect to come home with a hit song. I have spent more hours than I'd even like to count truly understanding what every knob on every piece of gear does here. And that is how it has to be for you to truly and effectively use this stuff, because like I said, it's not necessary. It is just my unique palette of colors, I'd like to say. And that's absolutely worth investing in, is your own unique palette, because everybody is going to have Serum, everyone's going to have the Waves plugins, everyone's going to have the basics, but it is really up to you to find your sound and figure out which colors and tones excite you and enhance your music. So Your selection of gear may not end up looking like mine. This is just through my experience what I ended up using and found it worked the best for me. So if you'd like to see any videos of me using this gear through Ableton or whatever, leave it in a comment below and I'll be happy to make a tutorial about it in the future. So until then, I'll see you guys with another video next week. Peace out.